Thank you.
Okay, this program is born out of the experiences I have. Can you all hear me first?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I got a yes on that.
Okay. This program is born out of what I've witnessed judging photo contests for PSA and clubs. And we want to talk about how we can all get together and make better images that will come out with better scores. So that's what this is really all generated towards. And I kind of want to start with this because this is kind of the backlog of the whole thing. Cameras have changed, and sadly, photographers haven't. We have cameras now that on their own can do almost anything. And I think one of the great problems is that most of the photographers I see in competitions don't utilize their cameras to the point where they can get the most out of them and therefore the most out of themselves. I think something we want to look at is the idea of you taking control of your photography. Your camera is just a tool. And when you're out in the field with that camera, the most important thing you have with you is what is located 6 inches behind the viewfinder. It's all about you. And it's what you do with your camera and how you make things work. We want to note that most images that I see in competitions and most images that are taken just on the face of the earth every day are taken by people who are standing up, holding the camera at eye level and shooting somewhere between, let's say, 9 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's what we see all the time. So if you want to have a unique image, you got to do something different. And that's what we're going to try to look at tonight, how we can go about doing things differently. One of the things I see most often is the good old rule of thirds. It's when I see photographs, I see basically two things. They're either fill the frame where they get the subject and it's in the middle and it's just sitting right in front of me, or they try to do something with the rule of thirds. And easily half the photographs in any competition I see will be based on the rule of thirds. If that's what you're showing and it's what everybody's showing, then yours doesn't have any way to stand out. So the idea is to try to find ways to make your images stand out far above everybody else. So I want to talk about what I think become the most essential elements that you can now use to generate better pictures. I want to start with the idea of just what is your subject? What are you going to use for the subject of your picture? And what I always preach is the idea that your subject should be easily recognized by everybody. If your viewer has to stop and think, if they have to wonder what it is, you failed to win your audience. Your subject should leap out of the frame and should stand out. It should be well separated from the background. It should be bold. And if you follow those rules, that puts you way ahead of most of the people you're going to be competing against. But more than just getting your subject, what we want to do is today's camera will take a perfectly exposed picture if you just put it on automatic and let it do the thing. Images come out sharp because the camera self-focuses. So what can you do to raise your image? And we want to look at the idea of using what I refer to as the elements of art and design, things that include lines and shapes and forms and texture and patterns. The more you can think about using those things and the more you can incorporate them into your images, the better you're going to be. You need to think like an artist more than just like a photographer. All right. We've seen these kind of pictures dating back to the Renaissance where artists on a blank canvas use the idea of putting lines in pictures, lines that will guide the viewer to what you want them to see. So you can control the viewer. To be successful, you want to be a control freak. You want to make the viewer look exactly where you want them to look. Don't let them get lost. Don't let them get confused. You want to focus them where you want them to see. So Rembrandt does this, Leonardo does this. You can do the same thing. All right, we want to start with the idea of lines. And let's talk about lines for just a minute. The little stick figure over here on the side, it's just, I'm sorry, my screen is flipping on me here. There it goes. This little stick figure is just lines, but yet those lines convey enough information that even though they are crude and sloppy and drawn by an 8-year-old, that nevertheless, you know what you're looking at. When you put your photos together, you want to think in terms of using lines. Lines are one of the most powerful elements you can put into a picture. So we're going to see how lines can change your photograph. Lines can be used to show weakness or gentleness. The fine, thin lines you see on these trees don't show strength as compared to the lines over on the right-hand side, where the bamboo is solid and strong. Right? You pick the lines, you see them, you incorporate them when you put them into a picture. There are all kinds of lines that you can use. Horizontal lines, vertical, curved, all these different lines. You pick the lines that create the image the way you want it to be. You don't just hope the lines are there. You position yourself, you move the camera to make the lines work to your advantage. That's what takes the extra effort to it. In a photo such as this, if you look at the scene, all these textured lines coming across these red rocks, everything in this picture keeps swinging around and moving across and over to this gap. You see the curved lines here, the swirls, everything keeps moving us back in this one direction. And we get the added benefit of having a little hiker drop in here, but it's really the lines that make the picture powerful. So using those lines to your advantage will make a difference. Here's another case where you can use lines to work to your advantage. This is the Lotus Temple in Southeast India, but I want to call your attention to the way the lines are put in place. Through the use of an ultra-wide angle lens, the lens has bent the picture. The lines on the sides are angled and curved to almost envelop and surround the temple. The lines on the outside with their curves match the curves of the lotus for the top of the roof of the building. So you've got bends and curves that all pull with it. You have lines that lead you deep into the picture. All the lines are doing, they're framing, they're accentuating the picture. Look at the lines of the clouds in the sky. Using the long exposure, the lines shift and draw you back to the temple. This is all about the photographer using lines to create the feel to the image that they want to add to it. This is what you want to start looking for, ways that you can make lines work for you. Often when I see pictures, I see lines that someone will tell me I have leading lines. Yes, but where do the lines lead to? If they're not leading to something worthwhile, they're not giving you any backup, any purpose. So lines are one element. Shapes are another element, right? Particularly the idea of using repeating shapes. But shapes can be natural, they can be organic. Stones work beautifully. Shapes can be geometric, such as the windows you see in the part of the photo on the right. Right? You choose what will build your image to your focus. Shapes are used to create your mood. For example, in the following photograph, This is taken in Acadia National Park. This is the black rocks on the beach, even though they're not all black this time of day. But note all of those shapes and rocks and all those textures that lead into it. They dominate the picture. They give it a sense of mood and feeling. So it's finding ways to use these kind of shapes that will add something to your photograph, right? Rather than just get out and take a picture of the beach, use the shapes, use the lines that you can find to augment what you're trying to create. Texture is another element that you can use to craft and make your picture work to your advantage. We'll talk about this little buffalo for a minute. When you're photographing animals or nature, you have to deliver to your audience what they expect to see. Right? When you think, for example, of a buffalo, what comes to mind? Where does the buffalo look his greatest? And for me, I think the buffalo is more buffalo-like if he's in a snowscape where he has to struggle for survival and work through that cold, miserable winter. So putting the buffalo with the snow on his face, adding the extra texture to the buffalo adds power to your image. So it's using these art elements to make them work, to make them more powerful so they can sway your audience. Then we come to the idea of color. And what are you going to do with color? Color is one of the easiest ways to create mood and impact for an image. We need to think in terms of making use of complementary colors. As a note, the color of blue and yellow orange are the complementary colors that appear most often in photographs that are winners in competition. Most images, or not most, a great percentage of images that win have blue and yellow orange as their complementary colors. They're soothing, they're comfortable, people like them, and they therefore work better. The colors of yellow, I'm sorry, the colors of red and green, another powerful pair of complementary colors. Start to think for a minute, why are they chosen for Christmas? Right? I mean, that's what's there. When you look at colors, color is your tool to making people pay attention. The colors red, if you're going to have red in your image, and I don't care where it is, if red is in your image, it's going to draw the eye of the viewer. Mm-hmm. So no matter where it is, even if it's very tiny, the viewer will look at it. That's the same idea behind the stop sign. Stop sign's red because they want you to look at it. So you put red in your image, the viewer is going to look at it. So if red is there, does it add to your image? If not, you need to move. You need to recompose your picture to move that red out of your frame if it's not going to help you. But color matters. And so often we see images that are very busy. Better winning images will use limited color palettes. The more you can simplify the image, the stronger it will become. Most people put so much stuff into their images. They become so busy that people get lost. Use color to your advantage, and it will make a big difference. Here with this, look at the color palette. It's very simple. I mean, you only have red, green, and a little bit of black, and that's it. There's nothing else there. But notice how the color focuses and dominates and drives the image. That's what you want to do. And by simplifying this, the power of the image becomes much greater. That's the goal. Use color to drive your image. All right. Here's a real simple image. This is just a pier that I found floating on a small lake. in North Carolina on a very foggy morning, there are effectively three colors. There's a little bit of brown, there's blue, and there's yellow, and there's nothing else. And a very simple item can become very dramatic and very powerful just by using the colors and simplifying the color palette. So this is a big step that you can think about all the time. Keep it simple, tone it down, pay attention to it. Notice the difference in moods between the frog and the pier. One is in your face and bold, one is simple and calming. Blue and yellow, simple and calming. They will draw attention. Using space in images. Again, this is something we tend to want to fill a lot of images with a lot of stuff. Cut the stuff down. Use only what you need and keep the image simple. You can have positive space that is taken up by things in the image, or you can have the empty negative space that can be used to create depth and space and quiet and peace within the image. So think about how you can keep that space working to your advantage. Remember the pier I just showed you. There's nothing there. Just that little pier and everything else is gone, but the image still has power. All right. Space does not have to be something, or it doesn't have to be empty. It can just be space. Notice this whole wall over here on the right side of the picture. There's really nothing there, nothing that draws you away from the image, but it's a filling space, and that will work also to your advantage. One of the things you want to think about adding to pictures is the idea of visual balance. It doesn't always have to be of equal weight, but something has to balance the image, particularly if you're trying to play with things like the rule of thirds, or you're getting stuff in an image that weights on one side of it. So in this particular case, the tree on the right is balanced by the fog on the left, and it gives weight to both sides of the image and keeps it a little better balanced. Notice the foreground light on the grass. There's weight on the left and there's weight on the right. Those two pieces add balance to the picture and give meaning to it. Often leaving one side empty makes the viewer kind of drift and fall off to one side, and they get lost in the picture. Balance matters. All right. One of my premises that I talk all the time when I teach is the idea of simply remember a kiss. Keep it simple. Think about keeping it simple. This is a tree on a lake up in North Carolina, and I want to call your attention in this photograph to the fact that there are about 24 boats racing around that lake. It's surrounded by resorts. And when I was out there that evening to take a picture, the lake was full of moving boats. By using the long shutter speed, the boats magically disappeared. And it changes the whole mood to the picture. This is something else that people don't do a lot of with pictures. Using the power of shutter speeds to make a difference. I often have people tell me, that unless they're doing birds in flight or lions jumping on gazelles or something like that, where they think we got to have a fast shutter speed. Otherwise, the shutter speed becomes kind of an accidental thing, something I didn't remember to do, or it's just kind of there. But you can use the shutter speed to craft and create your picture. Here, if I with a faster shutter speed, I'd have all the boats, and the power of the image would simply be lost. All right. This is a summer sunrise in the Everglades in South Florida. Right. The long, slow shutter speed, move the clouds, drift the clouds, and change the mood of the picture. Think about using those shutter speeds to make a difference. right? Here's another interesting use. When you're working with shutters and working with water, look for movement in the water and find ways to use that movement to your advantage. Here I found that because this is a pond in front of a housing development, but there's a small fountain over on the far left side, and it makes the water turn and move. So I simply use that moving water and the bubbles in the water to create swirling lines that filled the foreground, and yet those swirling lines will actually bend and curve and move you back to the tower in the background. So using the lines in the water, when I go out with the camera, I look for lines and find ways to move those lines and make them fit the picture. All right, here's another case of making things move in the picture. This is a 3-minute exposure taken just at sunset. And look what happens to those clouds. Right? They just become magical using that long, slow shutter speed. Right? It flattens the lake. It can become still and quiet, and yet the clouds have been allowed to drift and move, and it changes the whole focus of the image. These are things that people don't see, and you as the photographer can show them this, bring them in and let them see something different, because all they're seeing is that same kind of picture that was taken between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. by somebody standing up and holding that camera. You don't generate excitement. A judge will look at your picture in a competition. If it wins, if it gets to the awards, a judge is going to see that picture at least 6 times. If he's going to look at it 6 times, you better give him something to look at. Because if all he sees is ordinary, then the picture falls apart. So your image has to do something that makes somebody sit up and go, oh, wow, is that a cool idea? I haven't seen that before. It's different. Find a way to motivate them. All right. Look for doing something unique and original. Over on the far left, I have a little photograph that I took. This was on one I took just by accident. I was in North Carolina to photograph a sunrise. And this is a picture of the Marquis de Lafayette standing in his park, looking at the building in the background. I simply put the old against the new, the old Marquis against the new building that now stands in his park. Something different, using the building to juxtapose the subject. Here's a photo of an alligator. Right? I don't know. I think you have alligators in Texas, right?
Oh, yeah.
You got them? All right. This is an alligator that I chased. This was taken the day before Hurricane Irma hit Florida. And I chased this alligator around a pond in the rainstorm for hours until I finally got him to surface with all the raindrops hitting the water around him. All right. Something completely different, but yet it has drama and it has interest. And note that one little touch of the warm color, the yellow around the eye, color matters. Very simple color palette, but adding that one little touch of yellow around his eye, just bring it up just a little bit so it shows, and you have a whole different feel to the picture. Use color, use these elements to change the feel of the image. All right, here's the photograph I went to North Carolina to take. This is sunrise. I won't give you the whole backstory; it's not worth it. But it happens one day a year when the sun rises in the arch of that market house. But to me, the sunrise was the big show. But the lines of the street, the cobblestones, I think make the image. So it's a matter of looking for there were about 40 photographers there that morning trying to take this picture. Everybody else was standing up. I was the only person laying on the ground using my platypod to hold my camera at ground level.
I bought one of those at your suggestion. I've got one. I've enjoyed it.
Isn't that a great tool?
It is. It's really cool.
And if you have a tilt screen on the back of your camera, it's even better. Then you don't have to
Absolutely.
get all the way down. But getting down low, and that's something else that photographers don't do enough of. Everybody standing up. Change your angle. Watch what happens if you change an angle. All right. We're going to talk about simply being patient and waiting for things to happen. Now watch. All right. This is an iPhone picture I took up in Connecticut. All right. And it's a tree in a field with a stone wall. But, and here's the key thing I want you to remember. There's the next picture, just taken a few minutes later, or actually a few seconds later. And note what I've done. I've separated the tree from the clouds. Here, the tree merges to the clouds. Remember this thought. If an element is worth having in your picture, it's worth making it stand on its own merit. Here, the tree is being merged with the clouds. Here, the tree stands on its own. By letting the tree stand on its own, it becomes more dramatic. These are the same concept. Here's another picture. This was taken on the Outer Banks with a lighthouse early in the morning, early at sunrise, and I have these clouds drifting across the sky. So I waited. I waited until the lighthouse got between the two clouds. That's when I took the picture, right? It's waiting and watching and seeing what's happening around you. Be patient and let the image come together. Be aware of what's happening. Backgrounds matter. So if you have a background, how can you make that background contribute to the picture, right? Think about ways to employ it, right? Again, patience matters. Here's a bridge also out on the Outer Banks. This is an old wooden bridge built by some of the earlier settlers who were in the area, and it's a nice bridge. But if I wait 45 minutes, then I have this bridge. All right. So often when we travel, we get someplace, we came to see this building, this bridge, this whatever it happens to be, and we got our picture. Now we can move on. Wait for it to happen. Just be patient and wait. Light is one of the most powerful tools you have. It can change a picture dramatically in seconds. So let the light happen. Most often, photographers don't use light. Well, all right, yes, they use light. Without it, there is no picture, but they don't take advantage of the light. So you wait for the light to be right. That sunrise coming through the arch of the market house, I waited a year to get that picture because it only happens once a year, right? Wait for the light. Study your subject. Wait for the light to do its thing. Give it a chance, and you'll end up with better images. All right, we're going to talk about choosing a good angle to take your picture. Here's a Florida lighthouse sitting on a point facing the Atlantic Ocean. This is on an inlet. The inlet, I think, is terribly wide. I needed a foreground, but the foreground is on my side of the inlet, and the lighthouse is on the other side of the inlet. And I have this huge empty space of water that really isn't doing me any favors. So what if I change me? Instead of standing up and taking this picture, if I move, instead of kneeling when I took this one, I'm going to rise a little bit, stand up and move those rocks. And now I get this. And by changing my angle, I change the look of the picture. Right? When you're out to take a picture, don't settle on what you've got. I strongly recommend when you arrive at a location, put your gear down. Don't set your tripod up. Because most of the time, if you set a tripod up, it's going to stay there because you already put it up. So don't put anything up. Walk around with your cell phone and try all kinds of combinations. See what you can find that will give you some ideas. Then start setting up so you get the angles that you want to get, because the angle you are in matters. And sometimes it matters if you just move a few feet. And I mean, all this is moving the camera up and down to get this as opposed to this. So it's a matter of thinking it through. How can I make the image work better? Now, with all of that said, we're going to talk about what does it really take to be a winner. A year ago, just about a year ago, well, actually a little bit over a year now, I had the privilege to be part of a jury that judged an English landscape competition. There was a 5-panel jury, and we looked through and picked out of almost 20,000 images. We select the winners in 6 different categories. And then we've selected the overall winners from those winners to be the grand prize winners. So what I have here are the top 6 winners in the landscape competition. So let's look and see what it takes to come out and be a real winner. In 6th place is the following. All right. All right. Now think about what we've talked about already tonight. Line, limited color palette, keeping things simple, finding the right angle, paying attention to the background, and look what you end up with. Now, something else I want you to be aware of. Here's some of the stats for the camera. This was, remember that this was taken in early 2022. Actually, they were taken before that. They were entered in the competition in early 2022. This was done on a Nikon D800 at 57 millimeters, 1/60th of a second at 100 ISO. What I really want you to pay attention to here is look at the focal lengths that are used for these landscape photographs. So often we think of landscape photographs with my wide angle lens. Well, pay attention to what winners use for photographs. All right. In 5th place is this. All right. Very simple, limited color palette, repeating shapes, lines. All right. Note the use of line, both horizontal and vertical. And then again, that's perfect matching of the color palette. And please notice also, notice how they nicely framed this picture. The bottom has kind of that soft white-green border. And look at the top with the soft white-green border, right? It's matching everything in the scene and putting it all together. What do they do it with? This is a 210 millimeter lens.
Oh.
All right. You don't think about using landscapes with long telephoto lenses. Now, why did they use a long telephoto lens? And let's figure it out. What property does a long telephoto lens have? I mean, we think about it to go out and take a picture of Bambi a half a mile away and bring Bambi closer to us. That's not what you want to do with a long telephoto lens. You want to understand what the lens can do. Long lenses compress what's in front of it. By compressing the forest, they squeezed all this together and made this picture fill itself up. Because there's much more space between those trees than what it actually shows, but the long lens compressed it. It's the photographer seeing the scene and using his gear to advantage.
Yeah, because it almost makes it look like the trees in the foreground are just really close to the trees in the background, but you know that can't be.
Right.
But it looks like they're just a few feet away, but they're not.
They're not.
Yeah,
It's,
but that
it's,
compression.
it's using that compression. It's understanding the lenses and what they will do. It's like that picture I showed you earlier of the Lotus Temple.
Mm-hmm.
Using the wide angle of that lens, instead of keeping the line straight, I made the lines curve around the temple. So I embraced the temple by using the wide angle property of the lens and letting it bend those lines.
Yeah.
Right. And this, I want to, because I've told you this a million times in your course, but lens companies make dozens of lenses, but they make each lens for a purpose. Right. It's designed to do a particular thing.
Right.
So if you understand what your lens is capable of doing, then you use that property to enhance your picture. You don't, the one thing that drives me crazy is when photographers talk about their walk around lens. I got my this lens, I use it for everything. No, you don't. You don't use it well for everything. You may use it for everything, but did you use it really well? Right. So if you're packing gear, pack it for a reason and use it for what it's designed to do.
Right.
All right. Super long lenses. They weren't designed just to take a picture of Bambi a half a mile away. The value of those lenses is their angle of view.
Mm-hmm.
You can use an 800 millimeter lens. It's got a 2% angle of view, a 2-degree angle of view. Right. You have nothing in that picture. You can isolate anything with that. Right? A shorter long lens has a wider angle of view, and it changes the dynamics completely. Use the lens that will get you what you want. Understand your lenses. Fourth place. Again, very simple. Repeating shapes, repeating forms, all right? The use of line. Note how they build a triangle from the angle they use to take this picture. All these little ice columns work to a center point and build it all up. Notice the water is being used to steer you in the same direction. If you look at the ice is all kind of moving to the right. The waves are moving to the right. Everything in the image is flowing. And even note the little trees, the poles, wherever they are over on the far right, the ones that are bent, they're moving to the right. It's bringing all of the elements together and making everything fit together. I like to think of the term being cohesive. Everything in the image fits and works for one single purpose. And that's what makes the difference, right? There's enough texture in the water. Yes, it's blurred, but there's enough detail in that you can see the movement in the water that mirrors with it. And you can almost find cones in the white to go with the water. Mm-hmm. Lens factors, done with the Canon. This is done with 111 millimeters. Right, another telephoto lens for a landscape picture. Third place. Now, the beauty of this, again, look at your leading lines. right? The soft curves of the lines that flow through the image and wind you back. And all that stuff winds and leads to that poor little tower in the background, right? That tower is not that big, but with the lines flowing to it, you go back and you see the tower, even though there's not very much of it there, right? It's the photographer planning and sculpting the image, composing it to work for him, right? Now, by now you should be able to guess the lens.
300 millimeter. Wow.
300 millimeter. I mean, what would that have looked like with the wide angle lens?
What tower? What tower, right?
What tower? not only what tower, but think of the space that, I mean, the image would have been all about that first little curve in the water. That's all it would have been, because the wide angle lens would have captured that and diminished everything else.
Yeah.
But by using the long lens, all of a sudden, all of this comes into play. And look how it kind of magically transports itself. And one of the things that we liked about this, we just kept talking about it, is look at the levels and all the layers in the clouds, all the horizontal levers, and then look at the lines going back and forth across the water, the wide expanse of the turns. And I mean, what I think they've done beautifully, we have an inverted triangle in the whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting from a narrow point in the center and going to the wide color point at the very top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all been done by compressing. And again, think about the angle that this photographer used vertically. How low or how high did they get to make all of these different layers and levels show? Right? It's that careful planning through the whole thing. That's why I said, when you go to a site, get there early. When I went to take that sunrise picture, I researched it. I knew it was going to happen. I went there the day before, and I got there early in the morning. It was 17 degrees. I got there early in the morning the day before, map out everything and figure out where I wanted to be, how high I wanted to be. I even took a piece of chalk and marked the street, right? So I would know where I wanted to be the next morning. I mean, we can laugh about it, but it's planning the image before you take it. You don't just show up and take the picture, because you miss all this detail. So you got to think it through and plan every step of the way. Second place.
Oh, wow.
Right. We really loved this picture. I mean, there's so many things in here that just appeals to me. It is seldom that you find images that don't have a firm subject that come across so powerful. In this case, the subject is simply the light. It's the bright spot in the background. But look at how carefully they crafted this picture to put it together. Look at all those vertical lines that become beautiful frames, frames within frames within frames, to keep moving you back to it. Look at the balance in the picture with the big heavy trees on both sides, the clumpy green trees in the center, more to the center on both sides. Note the little bit of blue flowers in the foreground. Just enough to add a little bit of color to pull your eye and to break up that single tone of the color, a little bit to kind of get you started. And note they framed it all with green moss plant that circles all that blue and wraps it up. And then the soft glow of the fog and the mist in the background to fill this all in. All right. Very simple, very careful planning. Right. And even this is done with a 56 millimeter lens. Right. And now in this next picture, I have to tell you about this. 5 judges, 20,000 pictures were entered. When we got down to the final round, 5 judges, all 5 of us gave this image top marks, and we all gave it, they all scored on a 20-point scale. Nobody scored this less than 19.
Wow.
Everybody picked this exactly the same. All right. Which I thought was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, just phenomenal. I don't care who judges your photo club. They aren't that accurate. Nobody's, this is just wild. So here's the number 1.
Wow.
Now, one of the things I want to talk about with this image, because I think this is so important, is I always like to offer the concept of being original. Do something different. Don't do what everybody else is doing. All right. These are waves pounding on a beach. Where's the photographer?
He's in the waves. Maybe he's back with a long lens. Is he compressing it with a long lens? Is he laying down in the water?
One of the first things that hit me when I looked at this picture, it was one of the first thoughts I had was, how do you do this? Where is he? Because usually this scene is taken from the shore looking out to the sea. But this one is not.
He's in a
right?
boat.
Well, he can't be in a boat because the shutter speed's too slow. I mean, my first thought was what you said. He's in a boat, but then he can't be in a boat because that's not a fast shutter speed, and he can't keep the image that steady in a boat. So he's not in a boat. So he's hanging in a balloon, or I don't know. But we can laugh about it and all that stuff, and that's great. But the point is, everybody notices it, right? And that's what helps, because the image is different. Think about all 6 of these images. They're all different. And they're all unique. You haven't seen stuff like that. And note, they are not taken of famous landmarks. They were taken of just things that the photographer found, right? You don't have to be in the perfect historical spot or in the perfect Chamber of Commerce spot to get the picture. You have to see the picture. The most important thing in your camera bag, the most important thing you take with you is your mind. Use your mind and create an image using your mind, right? I love the lines in this, the flow of the water, the action created by the curls and the swirls. I like the balance. Here I go again. I like the balance of the mist and the spray on the left, and notice the mist and the spray on the right. All right. Notice also how the photographer neatly framed that little bitty building on the right hand. It's framed in the greens. It's also framed in the whites of the water.
Yeah.
All right. So they isolated a picture within a picture for you. And yet, and I think one of the things I also think works is that house, I think it's a dark spot. Well, look at the big swirl over here on the left side of the picture, the big right over here, and note the dark spot in the middle of it. This swirl and this piece fill over here. And I have visual balance again. It's piecing these things together. Also, please notice how many of these images are taken in anything but a sunny day. All right. None of that 9 to 5 stuff. They were all taken at early or late hours. And most of them were not taken in even good weather on the odd hours of the day. They were taken in stormy and cloudy and foggy and rainy and all kinds of different stuff, and cold, ice, right? Right. They were taken under differing circumstances than what we normally think of. It's working at the craft, not just going out to take a picture. Oops.
100mm.
Even this is with a 100mm lens. And the other thing I thought, and not that it matters, but the other thing I thought that came with this is none of these cameras for these pictures, and these were taken last year, and none of them were done with a mirrorless camera. Right.
Maybe I won't worry about switching to mirrorless anytime soon then.
I mean, one of the things, the only reason I have nothing against mirrorless cameras.
Yeah, no.
But my point is this: it's not the gear; it's the photographer using the gear, and how well you understand and how well you use your gear. That's what's going to make the difference in your pictures.
Absolutely. We're having some kind of glitching issue with my
That's not a problem because I just hit the end.
I think it may be the weather. It's storming here, and
quick, stop talking, get your camera, go outside.
you're back. But my volume keeps dropping all the way down.
Is your mic laying on it?
My mic's laying on the volume. Okay, let me turn it all the way back up.
We're gonna swing to our correctly.
There we go. Are we back now? I think I did that.
I'm still
Okay.
here.
All right. Real quickly, does anybody have any questions for Larry? Real quickly. Again. Round of applause. Thank you so much, Larry. Wonderful.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
We appreciate you so much. Appreciate your time. You have a good night, and hopefully you'll be hearing from me from time to time. Maybe I'll get back into one of your classes.
I would
Thanks.
be delighted.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.